Story: I wish you weren't my wife. Millionaire husband said, on anniversary, pregnant wife did the unexpected. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments. Can success excuse erasing the person who helped create it? Stay to the final scene, because no one will lose a company by magic tonight. The consequences will unfold through evidence, lawful choices, parenthood, and time. Sometimes one sentence does not end a marriage. It reveals how long the marriage has already been ending. The grand ballroom of the Crescent Monarch Hotel shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, each reflection dancing across polished marble floors like fragments of a perfect illusion. Soft violin music floated through the air, while waiters moved silently between tables covered in white roses and golden candlelight. Every influential face in New York's business world seemed to be present. Investors, executives, politicians, celebrities, and journalists had gathered to celebrate the 10th wedding anniversary of billionaire entrepreneur Ethan Holloway and his wife, Claire Whitmore. From a distance, they looked like the definition of success. Claire stood gracefully beside her husband in an elegant ivory maternity gown that gently embraced the curve of her pregnancy. Her long blonde hair rested softly over her shoulders, and her calm blue eyes carried the quiet warmth of someone protecting a life more precious than her own. She smiled politely at every guest, thanking them for coming, never asking for attention. Ethan, dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, accepted congratulations with effortless confidence. Cameras adored him. Reporters repeated his latest achievements. Every headline called him the visionary who had built one of America's fastest-growing companies from nothing. No one noticed that Claire had spoken fewer than 20 words the entire evening. As dessert was served, the master of ceremonies raised his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear a few words from the couple who inspire us all." Thunderous applause echoed through the ballroom. Ethan accepted the microphone with the relaxed smile everyone expected. He thanked the guests. He praised his company. He joked about success. Laughter rolled across the room. Then his eyes drifted toward Claire. For one endless second, the ballroom became perfectly still. His smile faded. "I wish you weren't my wife." The sentence landed with horrifying simplicity. Just 7 quiet words that cut deeper than any public argument ever could. The laughter vanished. Forks stopped halfway to plates. A champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered somewhere near the back of the room. Claire didn't blink. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. Instead, she looked at Ethan with an expression so peaceful that several guests instinctively lowered their eyes, unable to understand what they were witnessing. Ethan cleared his throat, almost as though he had merely made an awkward joke. "I think we'd both have happier lives if we'd never married." The photographers who had spent the evening chasing glamorous anniversary portraits suddenly hesitated, unsure whether to lower their cameras or keep recording history. Claire slowly reached for her wedding ring. Every movement felt impossibly gentle. She twisted it once, twice, then she slipped it from her finger. Without saying a single word, she placed the ring carefully beside Ethan's untouched champagne glass. Its faint metallic sound against the crystal echoed louder than the orchestra. She rested one hand over her unborn child. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Not the smile of someone defeated. Not the smile of someone pretending everything was fine. It was the quiet smile of a woman who had finally stopped carrying a burden no one else could see. She picked up a small ivory envelope that had remained beside her dinner plate throughout the evening. She neither opened it nor explained it. Holding it close, Claire turned toward the exit. Hundreds of eyes followed her across the ballroom. No one dared stop her. No one understood why she looked lighter with every step she took away from the stage. Behind her, Ethan remained frozen beneath the chandeliers, unaware that the sentence he had spoken only moments earlier had not destroyed Claire Whitmore. It had awakened a future he never imagined was waiting just beyond the ballroom doors. Long before Ethan Holloway became the billionaire every business magazine admired, there was a tiny office above an old bookstore where ambition outweighed comfort and dreams were larger than the room itself. The paint peeled from the walls. The heater barely worked. The only luxury was a second-hand coffee machine that groaned louder every morning than either of them ever complained. Claire Whitmore loved that place. Not because it was beautiful, because every blueprint scattered across the desks carried a future they believed they were creating together. Back then, Ethan was brilliant, relentless, and endlessly optimistic. He spoke about changing industries with the certainty of someone who had never imagined failure. Investors rejected him. Banks dismissed him. Friends quietly suggested he find a safer career. Claire never did. She sat beside him through every rejection letter. She rewrote presentations until sunrise. She corrected contracts. She built financial projections. She researched competitors while balancing freelance design projects that quietly paid their rent. Whenever Ethan lost confidence, she found enough for both of them. No headline would ever mention those nights. Years later, newspapers would call Ethan a self-made visionary. Claire smiled every time she read those words. Not because they were true, because correcting them no longer mattered. The first major investor walked into their office on a freezing February afternoon. He barely looked at Ethan. Instead, he studied the market analysis spread across the conference table. Who prepared this? Ethan hesitated. Claire looked up from her notebook. I did. The investor nodded slowly. This is the smartest risk assessment I've seen this year. After the meeting ended, Ethan wrapped his arms around her. We did it, he whispered. Claire believed him. She always believed the word we. Months became years. The company expanded from one cramped office to an entire downtown floor. Employees arrived. Departments formed. Reporters started calling. Television interviews followed. Something else quietly changed. Claire's name disappeared from conversations. Let Ethan handle the interviews. People recognize his face. It's better branding. Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they slowly erased her. Claire never argued. She preferred solving problems to collecting applause. When Ethan accepted an award for Entrepreneur of the Year, she watched from the audience instead of the stage. He thanked investors. He thanked mentors. He thanked his executive team. He forgot to thank the woman who had written the speech in his pocket. The audience rose in applause. Claire joined them. No bitterness crossed her face. Only silence. Then came the morning she discovered she was pregnant. She stood alone in the bathroom, holding the small test with trembling hands. A laugh escaped before tears followed. She imagined tiny footsteps echoing through their home. Bedtime stories. Family vacations. A child growing up surrounded by love instead of board meetings. That evening she prepared Ethan's favorite dinner. Candles flickered across the dining table. She waited until he finished answering emails. I have something wonderful to tell you. Without looking away from his phone, Ethan smiled distractedly. What is it? We're going to have a baby. The room became impossibly quiet. Claire waited for excitement. Instead, Ethan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. Now, the single word carried more weight than shouting ever could. Our expansion is just beginning, he said after a long pause. Everything is happening at once. Claire's smile faded only slightly. We'll figure it out together. He nodded automatically, but his attention had already returned to the glowing screen beside his plate. For the first time since they had begun building their future, Claire realized she was celebrating alone. She gently placed her hand over the life growing inside her. Outside their apartment windows, the city glittered with endless possibility. Inside, an invisible distance had quietly begun to grow between husband and wife. Neither of them understood then that it would eventually become wide enough to swallow an entire marriage. Rain had already washed away the footprints outside the Crescent Monarch Hotel by the time Claire Whitmore reached the sidewalk. Behind her, the ballroom still glowed with music, laughter trying desperately to recover from the shock Ethan Holloway had left hanging in the air. No one followed her. She did not expect anyone to. Her right hand rested gently over the child growing beneath her heart. Her left held the small, ivory envelope she had carried throughout the evening. It felt heavier now than it had only minutes earlier. A black sedan slowed beside the curb. Before Claire moved, her phone rang. The caller was Harrison, the retired attorney who had advised the startup years earlier. He confirmed the driver's full name, license number, and destination, then asked whether she preferred a hotel car or a ride arranged by her sister. Only after Claire verified the information with the concierge did she enter the sedan. Exhaustion had not erased her caution. The city lights blurred across the rain-covered windows as the car moved quietly through Manhattan. Claire never asked where they were going. Somehow, exhaustion had replaced curiosity. 20 minutes later, the sedan stopped in front of an old brick building overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't a luxury office. It wasn't a law firm. It looked almost forgotten. Inside, warm lamps illuminated shelves filled with leather-bound books instead of computer screens. A grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. Waiting beside the fireplace stood an elderly attorney with silver hair and perfectly pressed navy suits that seemed untouched by time. He smiled gently. Claire Whitmore. She recognized him immediately. Mr. Harrison? Nearly 6 years had passed since she had last seen him. He had once served as legal advisor to the small startup she and Ethan built together. I was hoping, he said softly, that tonight would never arrive. Claire lowered her eyes. So was I. He motioned toward 2 chairs. I watched the broadcast. She remained silent. There are moments, Harrison continued, when one sentence changes everything. Claire finally looked at him. I didn't come here for revenge. I know. You always said patience was stronger than anger. He nodded. And you listened better than most people. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the clock measured the silence. Finally, Harrison reached into an antique wooden cabinet and carefully placed a weathered cedar box onto the table between them. Its brass lock reflected the firelight. Claire stared at it without touching it. You kept it. I promised I would. She slowly traced one finger across the worn lid. Memories returned all at once. Late nights, coffee-stained business plans, handwritten partnership notes, dreams shared before success changed their language. This box, Harrison said quietly, has remained sealed exactly as you instructed. Claire closed her eyes. I hoped I'd never need it. So did I. He unlocked the brass clasp. The lid opened with a soft creak. Inside rested dozens of carefully organized folders, signed agreements, early corporate records, original ownership schedules, handwritten research journals, and a single flash drive wrapped in protective fabric. Nothing inside looked dramatic. Yet Harrison handled every page with extraordinary care. Do you remember what you asked me 6 years ago? Claire answered almost in a whisper. To protect the truth, until protecting my marriage was no longer possible. The attorney nodded. I honored that request. She picked up the flash drive. Her reflection shimmered across its polished surface. So this is what remains. No, Harrison corrected gently. This is what has always existed. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. Inside the office, Claire took a slow breath and carefully closed the cedar box once more. She had walked out of the ballroom believing she was leaving behind her past. Instead, she had just placed her hand upon the one thing capable of rewriting everyone else's future. The following morning, Holloway Dynamics appeared exactly as it always had. Employees hurried through revolving doors with coffee in hand. Assistants filled conference rooms with reports prepared before sunrise. The company continued operating, but Ethan Holloway arrived distracted. His anniversary speech had spread across social media overnight, and senior managers avoided mentioning Claire whenever he passed. At 9 o'clock, Ethan entered the boardroom. The acquisition proposal, he said. Let's begin. Board Chair Rebecca Sloan did not open the presentation. We have another matter first. The company's general counsel placed a sealed memorandum in front of every director. During the night, Harrison had delivered authenticated copies of early formation agreements, ownership schedules, voting documents, and archived correspondence through counsel rather than appearing unannounced. The files had been placed under a litigation hold. Independent outside lawyers had completed only a preliminary review, but they had found enough discrepancies between the original records and later corporate histories to recommend a formal investigation. Ethan looked toward the empty chair at the end of the table. Where is Harrison? In the conference room next door, Rebecca said. The board invited him to answer limited questions. He does not represent the company, and he will not remain for our deliberations. Harrison entered carrying a slim document case, not the cedar box Claire had left in his office. He greeted the directors, then placed a certified copy of the original share schedule beside the general counsel's memorandum. What are you trying to prove? Ethan asked. Nothing today, Harrison replied. Independent counsel will determine what the documents establish. I am here to explain where the originals were stored, how the copies were made, and why Mrs. Whitmore preserved them. The large screen displayed a secure index. Founder's notes, early investment contracts, meeting minutes, voting agreements, emails, financial projections, revision histories. Many carried Claire Whitmore's name. One director opened the first expansion model. Another compared its metadata with the version archived by the company. She prepared this analysis, a director said. And the first investor presentation, another added. The restructuring proposal too. Ethan stared at the screen. He recognized the work. Years earlier, Claire had prepared drafts at their kitchen table, and he had carried the final versions into meetings. He had not forged her name or stolen stock. He had done something quieter. He had accepted a story in which her labor gradually became his instinct. Harrison answered questions about the files, but offered no conclusions. Before leaving, he placed one written statement in front of the chairwoman. It authorized the company to verify Claire's records while preserving every legal claim and defense. You were simply expected to remember, he told Ethan. Then he left. The board did not remove Ethan that morning. It did not freeze his bank accounts or declare Claire the owner. Instead, the independent directors approved a document preservation protocol, retained outside counsel, and required a second authorized signature for major acquisitions and related party transactions while the review continued. Ethan remained chief executive, but he was recused from decisions concerning his own conduct. Outside the glass walls, employees continued ordinary work. Products shipped. Customers called. Markets remained open. Only one assumption had begun to collapse, that Holloway Dynamics had been built by one extraordinary man with no one else's hands beneath the foundation. Rebecca closed the meeting with a sentence Ethan would remember for years. This board will follow the evidence. Not your marriage. Not the headlines. The evidence. For the first time since the ballroom, Ethan understood that the truth would not arrive as revenge. It would arrive as a process he could no longer control. 3 weeks later, Claire Whitmore stood beside a hospital window as dawn painted New York in pale gold. Close to her due date, Claire felt the contractions come steadily. Her sister Sarah held her hand while nurses prepared the room. Her phone remained off despite requests from journalists. There was no crisis to solve or reputation to protect. Only a child ready to enter the world. Across the city, Ethan sat inside his office reading another request from independent counsel. The review had not stopped the company, but it had changed every room he entered. Directors asked questions instead of accepting assurances. Major transactions required another signature. Employees had begun sharing memories of Claire's work through confidential interviews. His assistant knocked and handed him a note. Claire had gone into labor. Sarah had notified him because Claire had authorized only that message in the hospital location. Ethan stood immediately. No vote required him to remain. No director blocked the door. This time, the choice was entirely his. He left the office within minutes. At the hospital, Claire concentrated on Sarah's voice and the rhythm of the monitors. Pain narrowed the world to breath, pressure, and the promise that each moment brought her closer to her child. Then a baby's cry filled the room. Clear, strong, alive. Tears slipped down Claire's cheeks as the nurse placed a newborn boy against her chest. "Hello, Noah," she whispered. The world became wonderfully quiet. Tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Nothing else mattered. Not stock certificates. Not headlines. Not the sentence beneath the chandeliers. Only the heartbeat resting against her own. Ethan reached the maternity floor shortly after the birth. Claire had instructed the hospital not to admit visitors until she had rested and to share no medical details beyond the general condition she authorized. A nurse told him that Claire and Noah were stable. He asked once whether Claire wished to see him. The nurse checked, returned, and gently said no. Ethan nodded. "Please tell her I understand." He left the flowers on a public table rather than asking staff to deliver them. He waited nearly an hour, knowing that waiting gave him no right to enter, but unwilling to repeat another easy absence. Before he went home, he wrote a note. "I arrived too late to protect our marriage, but I will not treat fatherhood as another title. I will follow the plan that gives Noah stability." The next morning, after Claire had slept, Harrison called rather than appearing at the hospital. He explained that one original voting agreement covered a small block of shares Claire had purchased with proceeds from her apartment. The agreement let those shares support one director nominee at a shareholder vote and required mediation before certain extraordinary transactions. It did not let Claire seize the company or control the board. "You have time," Harrison said. "Nothing needs to be signed from a hospital bed." Claire looked at Noah sleeping against her shoulder. "Prepare the notice for review after I go home. The nominee must be independent of both of us." A week later, after consulting her own corporate counsel, Claire signed the notice. She nominated a retired compliance officer with no personal loyalty to either spouse. Beneath her signature she wrote, "Protect the company. Protect its employees. Use only the rights the agreement provides. Never use them for revenge." The shareholders and board followed the governing documents. Claire exercised only the limited rights she possessed, and the independent candidate was later elected by the required vote. When Harrison asked whether she felt victorious, Claire kissed Noah's forehead. "No, I feel responsible." Beyond the hospital windows, another business day began. Inside the quiet room, Claire understood that she had gained something more valuable than control over a corporation. She had reclaimed control over the boundaries of her own life. The independent review took months, not days. Outside counsel compared formation documents, tax records, board minutes, emails, and the versions of company history used in public materials. The final report did not declare Ethan a fraud or transfer the corporation to Claire. It confirmed something more precise. Claire's work had been substantial. Her small equity interest and written voting agreement were valid. Several expenses had never been reimbursed, and specific design and strategic services had never been formally compensated. Public descriptions of Ethan as the company's sole architect had overstated his individual role. At the same time, the evidence showed that Ethan had led the company, raised capital, assumed major risks, and lawfully held the controlling interest recorded in the corporate books. The board adopted reforms, an accurate founder history, conflict of interest rules, protected reporting channels, and independent approval for major related party transactions. Ethan remained involved only after accepting limits on his authority and issuing a factual correction approved by counsel. He was not destroyed. He was required to become accountable. At a private board meeting, Rebecca placed the final statement before him. "You can disagree with the language," she said, "but you cannot ask the company to publish a story the evidence does not support." Ethan read the correction twice. It credited Claire's formative contributions without calling her an owner beyond the shares she actually held. It acknowledged his leadership without repeating the myth that he had built everything alone. He signed. The market reacted with less drama than the ballroom audience. Some analysts criticized the company's past disclosures. Others praised the independent review. A few investors reduced their positions. Most waited to see whether the reforms worked. Employees continued receiving paychecks. Projects continued. The company became less dependent on Ethan's personality and more dependent on written rules. Claire accepted reimbursement for documented expenses and compensation for specified work. She declined a public victory tour. No employee should lose a job because two people failed to tell the truth about each other, she told Harrison. The divorce followed its own lawful pace. Claire's attorney filed a summons and complaint in New York Supreme Court, and Ethan was personally served away from cameras. Temporary agreements addressed housing, medical insurance, support, and communication about Noah. Neither spouse tried the marriage in the press. Ethan initially spoke about access to his son as though fatherhood were an executive privilege. His matrimonial attorney corrected him. "A parenting arrangement is not a reward for the richer parent," she said. "The question is what serves Noah's health, safety, and stability. Show up. Learn his routine. Cooperate with his mother. Do not use gifts to compete with consistency." Because there was no evidence Ethan was dangerous, Claire did not seek supervised visitation. They agreed to short daytime visits after she returned home, with familiar caregivers nearby during the earliest weeks simply because Noah was a newborn and Claire was his primary caregiver. At the first visit, Ethan arrived early carrying diapers and the exact formula Claire had listed. When Noah cried, Ethan looked toward her in panic. Claire showed him how to support the baby's head and walk slowly. She did not comfort Ethan or discuss their marriage. She helped Noah become calm with his father. It was not forgiveness. It was co-parenting. There were setbacks. Ethan missed one visit because of an overseas call and expected Claire to rearrange the week. She refused. He sent an expensive silver rattle. She returned it and asked him to bring diapers instead. He became angry, then embarrassed, then quiet. The next month he attended every visit, took an infant CPR course, and learned Noah's feeding schedule. Trust was not measured by speeches. It was measured by ordinary repetitions, arriving, listening, returning the child on time, and never criticizing the other parent within hearing distance. For the first time in his life, Ethan began building something no investor could value for him. Over the next year, the legal cases moved through documents, conferences, and negotiated decisions rather than public spectacle. Claire did not ask a divorce judge to punish Ethan for being a cruel husband. She sought an equitable division of marital property, recognition of documented separate contributions, appropriate support, and a parenting arrangement centered on Noah. Their attorneys resolved most financial issues without trial. Claire kept her original shares in Holloway Dynamics. The company reimbursed verified expenses and paid agreed compensation for clearly documented work, but the settlement did not invent stock or ownership that formation records had never granted. Ethan retained his lawful interests subject to the governance limits adopted by the board. Parenting changed more slowly. After the missed visit, Ethan stopped expecting Claire and Noah to reorganize life around his calendar. Short visits became half-days. Half-days became Saturdays. When Noah was old enough, the schedule expanded to overnights. Ethan learned allergies, bedtime songs, pediatric appointments, and the difference between buying a child something impressive and knowing what made him feel safe. The parents used a co-parenting application for schedules and medical updates. A neutral parenting consultant helped them resolve practical disagreements before they became court motions. Claire encouraged Noah's relationship with Ethan when it was safe and consistent. Ethan stopped treating cooperation as surrender. Neither spoke negatively about the other within Noah's hearing. The corporate settlement followed the same discipline. In private mediation, Claire, Ethan, and authorized company representatives agreed on language for the historical correction, compensation supported by records, and procedures for future founder disclosures. A photograph from the original office entered the corporate archive beneath a simple description. Claire Whitmore, early strategic and design contributor. It was accurate, meaningful, and supported by evidence. Claire eventually stepped away from regular corporate involvement while retaining the rights attached to her shares. She used part of the settlement to establish the Whitmore Foundation, supporting women whose education or careers had been interrupted by caregiving, financial hardship, or unexpected motherhood. She refused to name the program after revenge. She wanted it associated with opportunity. Ethan remained on the board, but no longer stood alone at the center of every decision. He accepted independent review, recusal rules, and the possibility that other people could protect the company better than his instincts sometimes did. He still made mistakes. Accountability did not transform him overnight. It gave him a structure in which change could be measured. The final divorce judgment ended the marriage without erasing the family. Claire left the courthouse with no cameras waiting and no desire to celebrate. Ethan walked in the opposite direction, carrying the parenting calendar for the next 6 months. They had not saved their marriage. They had done something more difficult. They had refused to make their son inherit its war. 5 years passed without another public confrontation. Headlines faded beneath newer stories. Holloway Dynamics became a company governed less by personality and more by written procedures. The reforms survived changes in directors, market pressure, and Ethan's occasional frustration with limits he once would have ignored. That endurance mattered more than any apology. Claire disappeared from business television and began appearing in community newsletters. The Whitmore Foundation funded scholarships, child care assistance, and return-to-work programs for women rebuilding interrupted careers. Its largest project was a learning center in Queens with classrooms, a small library, and an outdoor courtyard shaded by maple trees. Claire designed the building herself. Every entrance was wide, every hallway bright, and every room included a place where a child could wait safely while a parent studied. On a warm September afternoon, the center prepared for its annual scholarship celebration. 6-year-old Noah raced across the courtyard carrying a paper airplane covered in blue marker. "Mom," he shouted, "watch this one." Claire turned from a group of scholarship recipients just in time to see the plane circle once and land in a planter. "It almost reached the fountain," she said. "It did reach it yesterday." "Then yesterday's airplane deserves the trophy." Noah laughed and ran to retrieve it. He had grown into a curious boy who measured success in books finished, friends made, and how long a paper airplane remained in the air. He spent school weeks with Claire and alternating weekends with Ethan under the parenting plan. The schedule had changed as he grew, but one rule remained. Noah was never responsible for carrying messages between his parents. Ethan arrived 20 minutes early for the event. Years earlier, arriving early would have meant an assistant had mismanaged his calendar. Now it meant he had promised Noah he would help repair the airplane before the children's presentation. He entered without an entourage and found his son at a craft table. "The left wing bends," Noah announced. Ethan examined it seriously. "Then we reinforced the fold. Mom says adding too much tape makes it heavy." "Your mother is right." Claire heard the sentence from across the room and smiled despite herself. Ethan noticed, but did not turn it into a private moment. He helped Noah fold a new wing, tested the balance, and returned the plane. Their co-parenting had become ordinary enough that strangers would not have guessed how painfully it began. Ethan attended school conferences, kept medication in both homes, and called when traffic threatened a late return. Claire shared report cards and medical updates without making him ask twice. They were not friends in the easy sense, and they were not moving toward reconciliation. They were two adults practicing respect because their son deserved to see it. Harrison, now fully retired, stood beside Claire near the library doors. "You built something remarkable," he said. Claire watched a mother guide her toddler into the childcare room before entering an evening class. "I built something that lets people continue," she answered. "Different from a company?" "Not entirely. But here, no one has to disappear for someone else to be seen." Across the courtyard, Ethan held the repaired airplane above his head while Noah counted down from 3. The plane crossed the fountain and landed near the stage. Noah shouted as though he had won a championship. Ethan looked toward Claire. He did not claim the design. He pointed to Noah, then to her, acknowledging both people who had helped it fly. The gesture was small. That was why Claire trusted it more than a speech. As evening settled over the learning center, families gathered beneath strings of warm lights for the scholarship ceremony. Students displayed the careers they hoped to begin again: nursing, engineering, teaching, architecture, and accounting. Claire listened carefully. The final recipient was a 53-year-old widow named Patricia who had left college 3 decades earlier to raise 2 children and care for her husband through illness. When Patricia accepted a scholarship to finish a social work degree, the courtyard rose. Claire understood that starting again was not reserved for the young. Noah sat between his parents during the ceremony. He leaned against Claire when he grew tired and handed Ethan the paper airplane when applause made it difficult to hold both. Neither parent treated the arrangement as symbolic. It was simply the shape their family had taken. After the guests began leaving, Noah ran toward the fountain with several children. Ethan and Claire remained near the stage, stacking abandoned programs. "I read the foundation report," Ethan said. "The child care grants doubled completion rates." Claire looked at him. "You read the whole report?" Noah said I should understand what his mother builds. That sounds like him. Ethan folded one program along its center. "There was a time when I thought being accountable meant losing authority. And now I think it means accepting that authority should have limits before someone gets hurt." Claire boxed the remaining programs. Their private apology had happened years earlier. These words showed that Ethan had kept thinking after apologies stopped earning attention. "I used to ask when everything fell apart," Ethan continued. "I blamed the board meeting, the records, the media. But those things only revealed what was already broken." Claire watched Noah launch his airplane beneath the lights. "The sentence at the anniversary did not end our marriage." "No," Ethan's voice softened. "It showed me I had stopped protecting it long before." They stood quietly. Some memories required only an honest name. Noah returned, breathless. "Dad, you're taking me to soccer tomorrow, right?" 8:30. "And Mom is coming to the game?" "I'll be there," Claire said. Noah nodded, satisfied. "Good. Coach says families should cheer, but not yell instructions." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That rule may be directed at your mother." Claire laughed. "You were removed from the sideline last month." I was passionately clarifying the offside rule. "In 6-year-old soccer?" Noah groaned. "Both of you need practice." He took both parents' hands because the parking lot was dark. They walked to the gate, where the parenting schedule resumed its ordinary shape. Noah hugged Claire, then climbed into Ethan's car for the weekend. Claire checked that his backpack and inhaler were inside. Ethan confirmed Sunday's return time. "See you at the game," he said. Claire nodded. "Drive safely." As the car left, Noah waved through the window. Claire watched until the taillights disappeared. Behind her, the learning center stood open for an evening class. In one bright room, Patricia arranged new textbooks across a desk and began again at 53. Claire understood then that justice had never been the sound of Ethan falling. It was the sound of doors opening, for her, for Noah, and for people who had believed their chance had passed. Fortunes can be rebuilt, companies reformed, and a broken marriage reshaped into a respectful family. Dignity returns through truthful records, lawful choices, consistent parenting, and recognizing another person's worth before pride erases it. Noah's paper airplane rested beside the fountain, its repaired wing lifting slightly in the night breeze. It had flown because several hands had helped shape it, and because no one needed to pretend otherwise.